You're sitting there, agreeing to things you don't want to do, again. Someone pushes your buttons and you react exactly how they predicted. You find yourself giving in to demands that go against your values, making excuses for toxic behavior, or feeling guilty for setting boundaries. Sound familiar? Here's what's really happening. Manipulators are master psychologists. They don't target your strengths. They hunt for your blind spots, your insecurities, the parts of yourself you'd rather pretend don't exist. They exploit what Carl Jung called your shadow. All those aspects of your personality that you've rejected, denied, or hidden away. The cruel irony? The more you run from these parts of yourself, the more power you give others to use them against you. Understanding the shadow. Carl Jung revolutionized psychology when he introduced the concept of the shadow in the early 20th century. But here's what most people get wrong about it. The shadow isn't just your dark side. It's everything about yourself that doesn't fit the image you want to project to the world. Think about it this way. From childhood, you learned what's acceptable and what's not. Your parents praise you for being good and punish you for being bad. Society rewards certain traits and shames others. Over time, you developed what Jung called your persona, your public mask, while shoving everything else into the unconscious shadow. But here's the kicker. Your shadow doesn't disappear. It lurks in your unconscious, influencing your behavior in ways you don't recognize. And manipulators? They're experts at sensing these hidden weak spots. How manipulators exploit your shadow. Let me give you some real examples. Say you've always prided yourself on being nice. You've pushed your anger, your selfishness, your capacity for cruelty into the shadow. A manipulator will exploit this by making you feel guilty for any hint of self-advocacy. They'll say things like, "I thought you were a good person," or "You're being so selfish right now." Your shadow fear of being seen as cruel or selfish kicks in, and boom, you cave. Or maybe you've built your identity around being competent and in control. Your shadow contains your vulnerability, your neediness, your fear of being seen as weak. A manipulator will subtly undermine your confidence, make you question your abilities, then position themselves as your savior. You end up dependent on someone who deliberately made you feel incompetent. Here's another common one. You pride yourself on being rational and logical, pushing emotions into your shadow. Manipulators will use emotional appeals, guilt trips, or create dramatic situations that leave you feeling overwhelmed and unable to think clearly. Your repressed emotions flood your system, and you make decisions from that confused, reactive state. The pattern is always the same. They trigger what you've disowned about yourself, and you react from unconscious programming rather than conscious choice. The integration process. So, how do you master your shadow? It's not about eliminating these aspects of yourself. That's impossible and counterproductive. It's about integration. Jung called this process shadow work, and it's perhaps the most challenging yet liberating psychological work you can do. First, you need to identify your shadow. This requires brutal honesty. What traits do you most despise in other people? What behaviors trigger your strongest reactions? Jung observed that we often project our shadow onto others. We hate most in others what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Do narcissists trigger you? Look for where you might have narcissistic tendencies you've never acknowledged. Do manipulators infuriate you? Examine how you might manipulate others in subtle ways. Does laziness in others drive you crazy? Consider where you might be avoiding responsibility in your own life. This isn't about self-flagellation, it's about recognition. You're not trying to become these negative traits, you're trying to own the fact that you have the capacity for them. The power of conscious choice. Here's where the magic happens. When you acknowledge that yes, you have the capacity for anger, for selfishness, for manipulation, for weakness, these traits lose their unconscious power over you. You can't be shamed for having anger if you've already accepted your capacity for anger. You can't be manipulated through your fear of being selfish if you've integrated your shadow's selfishness. Let me give you a practical example. Sarah always saw herself as completely selfless, never putting her needs first. Her shadow contained all her selfish impulses. Her boyfriend regularly manipulated her by saying things like, "If you really loved me, you'd cancel your plans and spend time with me instead." This triggered her shadow fear of being selfish,
and she'd always give in. After doing shadow work, Sarah could say, "You know what? Sometimes I am selfish, and that's okay. Sometimes I choose my needs over other people's wants, and that's healthy. Right now, I'm choosing to keep my plans." The manipulation technique that once worked perfectly suddenly had no power over her. Practical shadow integration techniques. Start with daily shadow journaling. Each evening, ask yourself, what triggered a strong emotional reaction in me today? What did I judge harshly in others? What behaviors did I engage in that I wouldn't want others to know about? Write without censoring. Practice the yes and technique. Instead of denying shadow aspects, acknowledge them. Yes, I can be manipulative sometimes, and I'm working on being more direct. Yes, I have selfish moments, and I'm learning to balance my needs with others. This removes the shame that manipulators exploit. Try perspective-taking exercises. When someone's behavior triggers you, ask yourself, how am I capable of similar behavior? This isn't about excusing harmful actions. It's about recognizing your shared humanity and removing your psychological blind spots. The transformation. When you integrate your shadow, something profound happens. You become psychologically complete. You're no longer trying to maintain an impossible image of perfection, so you can't be blackmailed with threats to that image. You develop what Jung called psychological immunity. When someone tries to shame you for being angry, you can respond authentically. Yes, I'm angry right now, and my anger is telling me something important about this situation. When someone tries to guilt trip you for being selfish, you can say, I'm prioritizing my needs in this situation, and that's appropriate. You also develop genuine compassion for yourself and others. When you acknowledge your own capacity for darkness, you can extend understanding to others without enabling their harmful behavior. You can set boundaries without demonizing people. Most importantly, you start operating from choice rather than reaction. Instead of unconsciously avoiding your shadow traits, you consciously choose when and how to express different aspects of yourself. Sometimes being selfish is appropriate. Sometimes anger serves you. Sometimes vulnerability is powerful. Real-world applications. In relationships, shadow integration means you can't be emotionally blackmailed. Your partner can't control you by threatening to see you as bad because you've already accepted your capacity for being bad sometimes. At work, you can't be manipulated through imposter syndrome if you've integrated your shadow's incompetence. You know you can make mistakes of not knowing everything, and that's human rather than shameful. In social situations, you can't be peer pressured through fear of judgment because you've already judged yourself honestly and found yourself acceptably human. The dark side of light. Here's something most self-help content won't tell you. Sometimes your shadow contains positive traits too. Maybe you were taught that ambition was selfish, so you pushed your drive into the shadow. Maybe you learned that confidence was arrogance, so you hid your natural leadership abilities. Maybe you were told that wanting attention was shameful, so you suppressed your charisma. Jung called this the golden shadow, positive aspects of yourself that you've disowned. Integrating these aspects is equally important. You can't be manipulated through false modesty if you've owned your competence. You can't be controlled through artificial scarcity if you've acknowledged your worthiness. Here's your homework. For the next week, keep a shadow journal. Every time someone or something triggers a strong emotional reaction in you, write it down and ask yourself, how might I be capable of similar behavior? Remember, this isn't about self-attack. It's about self-awareness. The goal isn't perfection, it's integration. When you stop fighting parts of yourself, others can't weaponize those parts against you. Master your shadow, and you become psychologically unmanipulatable. What shadow aspect will you integrate first? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights that help you understand the psychology behind human behavior.